Right chaps, you know by now what meal 1 and 2 is. It's the shake and it's the eggs. Let's talk about something different in this video. Let's talk about deload weeks. A deload week is a week in your program where you reduce your volume in order to reduce fatigue and recover and be able to train real hard again. Now, the reason that we have this fatigue in the body in the first place is a result of hard training. People that argue that they don't need to deload probably aren't training hard enough. The whole point of training is to beat your body down so that it builds itself back up and it comes back stronger. Obviously, there is a happy medium to be done there. You can't just overtrain and chronically train too hard that you're never going to get better. But you need to make sure that you are training hard enough that there is some fatigue that your body can recover from and adapt and then become stronger. Obviously, you recover from this fatigue session to session, but over weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, that fatigue will eventually add up to a point where you'll need to deload. If fatigue never set in and we had no limits, obviously you could just consistently keep adding weight to your lifts every single week, and that's unrealistic. For example, if you started at a 100 kilo squat and you added 5 kilos, which isn't a huge jump for a 100 kilo squat, you added 5 kilos to that squat every single week, in a year's time you would have a 350 kilo squat. It's unrealistic, it's not how the body works. Eventually fatigue will catch up with you the harder and harder that you train. I guess I can use a trusty whiteboard here to show you how it would work. So you've got fatigue here in time. So each session would be a bump in fatigue, but then you would recover from it to train again and again and again. And obviously over time, your fatigue has gone up. And once you're too fatigued, you can't get better. Your body doesn't adapt. It just keeps beating itself down and you can't get stronger. So we need to take a deload in order to sort of hit that reset button. We won't have any fatigue from this deload and we'll come back down to the starting point, hopefully. At which point we've got stronger, we've got bigger, or we've made whatever adaptations we have, but now we don't have the fatigue. So TJ, when should you deload? There are 2 different ways that we can do it. There are unplanned deloads, where if you just keep following a structure of training that just keeps going forever, right? Eventually you'll notice the following symptoms. You hit a plateau in your training whereby you can't increase the weight, you can't increase the amount of reps you do, you just feel like you're stagnating and you're not making any progress. That is a good sign that fatigue has caught up with you and you cannot keep improving. You need a deload. Another sign of fatigue is that you're constantly feeling tired. It doesn't matter how much you sleep or eat or whatever happens with your training, you're just constantly feeling tired and you realize that maybe again fatigue has overcome you and you're getting dragged down a little bit. You start feeling chronically sore, so your little injuries that are coming about keep coming up and they're a little bit more prevalent than they were before, or your tight hamstrings feel tighter than ever before and you're just feeling, your body feels a little bit run down, right? That's fatigue. And then one last one that I really do notice, I notice it for myself when it's time to deload, a loss in motivation. So a lot of people say, oh, how can I keep motivating to go to the gym after 20 weeks? And maybe that your brain needs a break, your body needs a break, or your brain indicates that your body needs a break. You lose your motivation, you don't really want to go to the gym. That is a good indication that it might be time for a deload week. And that's another good thing about the deload, is that when you take a week off or a lighter week, you come back from that week really motivated and eager and keen to train hard again, and it can actually give you, a set period of really effective training, followed by a lighter week, followed by more effective training, rather than just going through the motions week after week after week after month after month after year and you get nowhere. So which brings me on to the other way of doing a deload. You program it. So every 4 to 16 to 20 weeks you would just program a lighter week that you would do. That way you can see the light at the end of the tunnel and you can keep training towards that. Obviously 4 to 20 weeks is a huge discrepancy on how often you should take a deload. So I guess we should clarify that the more advanced lifters would need to deload more often, because they're probably going to be pushing more weight or pushing their body more to the limits. Beginner lifters won't know these limits yet, so they won't be able to create the amount of fatigue that would happen that an advanced lifter would be able to create. Another factor is, if you're in rugby season, I would definitely take more deloads more often, because you want to avoid being really fatigued, because you've got to play a game of rugby every weekend. And if you're playing a game of rugby weekend, not only does that create fatigue, but you want to be performing at your best. And if it's time for a deload, you know, you really overreached and you're feeling fatigued, you're not going to play as well as you can. So I would definitely be a fan of deloading more and more often during the season. And then the final reason for that, and probably the biggest factor in how often you should deload, is when you're in season, you're going through a lot of volume. Every match is very fatiguing. Every training session could and should be pretty fatiguing, rugby training session that is. And so that creates more and more fatigue. Same thing for more advanced lifters compared to novice lifters. Advanced lifters will probably be training at a higher volume and therefore would need to deload more often. If you're training at a low volume, or if you can afford to be fatigued, well, that's when you can afford to deload less often and experience more fatigue, so that eventually you can recover. Hopefully that makes sense for anyone else. Let's try and get the trusty whiteboard out again, and we'll do one more example of how I deload. Right, so the example here is going to be using volume at the top and time running down the bottom. Let's make this volume a little bit higher so we can make it easier, right? This isn't to scale. This isn't going to be perfect. In fact, look how bad my handwriting is. Just give me this. Just let me have this example, because hopefully you can get it visually, right? So from week 1, we've got an X amount of volume here. Okay, and then week 2, we're gonna add more volume in by way of either adding weight, sets, or reps, or 2 of the 3, or even in some exercises, all 3. Over time, or over this week, we're gonna add more volume. And then into week 3, we're gonna add more volume. And then week 4, we're gonna add even more volume. And this is gonna be overreaching. This is gonna be the week where I feel really fatigued, I'm a little bit tired, and this is, bearing in mind, this is my last week of pre-season. I'm going to feel a little bit beaten up, all right, feel run down. But that's fine, because I'm not playing a game of rugby and I know I've got a deload week coming up which I can recover from. In the deload week, we drop the volume, which is week 5, all the way down to here. So week 5, we have the deload down here. This doesn't represent 0. This is just a terribly drawn graph. Thank God I didn't pursue my initial career path of being a teacher. I cannot draw on whiteboards, evidently. Anyway, the first week of the next cycle, which is week 6, volume is going to be up here, okay? That's kind of in line with week 2, which is what I wanted, right? So we've started already at a higher volume, which means we're shifting more weight, we're making more gains, right? And then week 7 goes higher, 8 higher. This is such a bad graph, it's unbelievable. 9 higher, and then 10 is even higher. So I've got my overreaching now is harder here than it was in the first cycle, which means I'm making more gains. I can keep doing that, and eventually over time add more and more volume until I change the type of training that I want to do, or the adaptations that I want to make. So for this is going strength, hypertrophy, then you'd reset it and you do it differently for power. But that is the way you can continually make progress using deloads. One last thing about deloads is that you can rename them to intro cycles, and I believe that they can be more effective that way. So for example, this would be part of this training cycle, not this one. So what I would do is these movements here, not these. That will give me a week where I can get used to doing these different movements, finding where the machines are in the gym, or finding how to set up the different movement. Or if it's something I've never done before, I'm not going straight in and trying to make it a hard training session. I'm just trying to get a feel for the movement, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you found this beneficial. Well, that was a bloody serious talk there, TJ. Yeah, I know. Hopefully that explained it quite well. A couple of things I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention that number 1, sometimes you don't need to plan a deload, because sometimes you get sick for a week and you have to miss training, or you go on holiday, or things happen, like life gets in the way, where a week happens that you can't hit the gym. Sometimes it happens for my guys, and they're like, oh, I've got a holiday, or work's really ramped up and I can't make the first 2 sessions of the week, and I'm like, right, well, let's reduce volume from that last session and we'll just make that a deload. And sometimes that works really well. What was the other thing I forgot to mention? The other thing I forgot to mention is for rugby coaches and players, I guess, rugby training, when you take contact and when you do big contact drills, you're doing lots of tackling, lots of impact, that is really, really fatiguing. I did mention that, but a good way of doing it is if you can try and take deloads from rugby training as well. Especially if you're a coach, you can have your team deload for a week where we're focusing only on skills, patterns of play. Just take a lighter week of training, including rugby training, focusing a lot on skills, a lot on movement and stuff like that. Just drop the intensity a wee bit, drop the volume a wee bit, like maybe a video session or two, and that way your players don't get too fatigued during the season and they can keep getting better and keep playing well and hopefully not get as injured. If I don't get mugged down this alley, I'm heading to the gym and it's going to be my last deload of the week. Actually, some of this deload, or some of the sessions that I've done this week for the deload, have just involved filming. I've done lots of filming for exercise guides because we're going to be releasing training guides at Rugby Dump and on TJ Strength, and we need video explanations of every exercise because I want them to be correct. In this session I have to choose between a couple leg exercises, so I've been given the choice of a few different quad development exercises. I want to see if I can do belt squats, but I'm not too hopeful. I'm going to see if I can do them, and I'm going to use this session to try that out. That's only if my camera has enough battery. We're on 0 bars at the minute, so we'll see. We'll see. That's the end of the video. We're back on the casting couch. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, if you've made it to the end, please give it a thumbs up. Give a comment below if you really did enjoy this explanation of why we did it. I mean, I bought this whiteboard just to explain this sort of stuff, and I tell you what, I mean, I know I'm only beginning at this artistry, but maybe over time, if I can keep using this whiteboard, if you guys want it, ask any topics you want to explain in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.